need for traceability.
That was my fault. I didn't hit record before, so my apologies, but go ahead. Now
so when we established Capricorn Gems as a business a number of years ago, we saw that things were changing in this industry, and we wanted to be at the forefront of that. And we had a couple of advantages, which I'll point out a little bit shortly. But when we established the business, we knew and we could see things were changing. So in terms of particularly traceability and provenance, but also from an ethical production point of view. And I'll talk a little bit about that ethical side of things shortly. So we established the business clearly focused on a geographical area for our business, whereas most other gemstone vendors that are around basically have every gemstone from A to Z. So, we said, no, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is be the specialists in the gemstones that originate from our particular area in Queensland. In fact, not all of Queensland, but central Queensland. So, there are other gemstones in Queensland, but that's not our area. Our area is in central Queensland, and we've grown up there. We've understood the market there. We've understood the mining, the production, and all the processes around those 4 particular gems. And we just felt that it was important to bring that specialist knowledge and the product to the market and tell everybody about the gems.
So this area, this is like a large mining area.
Mm-hmm. It is. So central Queensland, essentially, well, Queensland's a fairly large state. It's as big as Texas. So central Queensland is a portion of that state that lies in the centre of the state. And the easiest way to remember it is lies on the Tropic of Capricorn. Capricorn Gems. That's how we get Capricorn Gems.
Yeah.
So the 21st parallel, Tropic of Cancer's up in the northern hemisphere, equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn lies on the 21st latitude parallel. That runs right through central Queensland, right from the coastal strip out to the far west. It's a very, very, very big area. So within this area, we're fortunate to have and been endowed with some beautiful gemstones, primarily boulder opal in the far west of the state, sapphire and zircon in the centre of the state, centre of the region, I should say, of central Queensland, and chrysoprase, which lies slightly north, at the northern edge of that boundary of that area. Now, as I said, there are other gemstones in Queensland and also in central Queensland, but they're not in commercial quantities. So this is in commercial quantities, and we can then bring those to the market with the full knowledge of the understanding right from where they're sourced right up through to production and the presentation into the market. So Capricorn Gems began with that notion, if you like, right from the get-go of bringing those gemstones to the market under those arrangements.
So I want to say our communications coordinator prepared some excellent questions, so I definitely want to get to them.
Absolutely.
So we've gotten the background about the business, but what about you as an individual, right? How did you get into this field?
Well, okay. So yeah, that's sort of a stop-start story, I guess, in some ways. I mean, this business is, I'm a little bit more than 15 years old. So, 7 years plus 10, well, put it this way, I've had other careers in my life. So this business started when I basically retired from a number of other roles that I did undertake. Previous to this, I was a yacht captain, would you believe, and sail the oceans of the world. Previous to that, I was involved in higher education and had a number of roles, but primarily the role was in the university as a dean of students, your equivalent, or a dean of students. And then I also lectured in the Faculty of Business, and I also had my own private consulting business. So, I did a number of things in that preceding from when I was in my early 20s to into.
So did you get into gems then because it was so prevalent in your area, or was it a different
Okay, so before that, when I was a kid, we used to go to the gem fields. My father used to take us to the gem fields, particularly to the sapphire fields, because they were only 30 minutes away from where we lived. We lived in a small country town called Clermont, and it's, as I say, 30 minutes away from the sapphire fields of central Queensland. So we often used to travel over there. And over there, you can actually go onto the gem fields, and you can fossick. We call fossick the word fossicking. You can fossick for stones, for sapphires. And there are special areas set up called general purpose areas by the state government, has set these areas up for tourists and others to come and fossick and take all your digging gear out and all your camping gear and camp on the gem fields and dig your way through to finding some stones. And you know, often you will hear of people finding some lovely sapphires and, of course, keeping them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it is possible. So that's when I was a kid. We did that as a kid, and then Dad took us out there. So you know, I always had an understanding of gems and rocks, and particularly sapphire, because you know we were digging them and specking after the rain. You know, after the rain, it's always a good time to go out there because the rain washes the surface, and you've got to be at the right time of day for the orientation of the sun, and the way you walk. The sun is here and you're walking into this, you're looking at the ground and the sun's shining here. So you're actually looking for the glint of the stone on the ground.
Ah, that makes
so
sense. Yeah.
We call that specking for sapphires. And yeah, again, you can find, I mean, it's been known to have found some beautiful gemstones, beautiful sapphires.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Well, you touched on this a little bit, but can you kind of dive in a little bit more about your philosophy regarding ethical sourcing?
Sure. Probably to explain this, it's best to take sort of a sideways step a little bit and look at ethics from a point of view of standards of living, I suppose, to some extent, and also to the degree of societal development, if I can use that very broad term. So as societies develop, we tend to be more conscious about ethics and the understanding of what ethical activity is. When you're looking at gemstones, gemstones are located around the world in many, many different places. It's located in so-called Western countries, located in so-called developing countries, and less developed countries. Some of those countries that are less developed probably haven't matured, I would use the term, haven't matured in terms of their approach to ethics as we see it in the Western world. Now, again, you can get into an argument pretty quickly here in terms of what's ethical and what's not. But certainly from our perspective as the West, we have a particular viewpoint on what ethical means, even though there's some divergence in opinion. There are some fairly standardized or accepted terminologies, if you use, or aspects of what ethical is, and such things as, I mean, child labour, health and safety expectations, restoration of environmental damage, payment of suitable wages, understanding the origin of the material, not funding terrorism or military activity. So all of those aspects have an ethical perspective. So in the West, we believe that those things need to be unpacked, opened up, and understood, so that everybody knows clearly what the approach is, particularly on those aspects to the particular circumstance that's in place. So in the Western countries, particularly Australia, in the US particularly, merely because I say those two countries, because precious gemstones are mined both in the US and Australia, specifically sapphire, Montanan sapphire, for example, and in our case, Australian sapphire. So our mining methodologies is very much attached to rule of law, approvals from the government, meeting certain criteria before you mine, a mine plan, and mining appropriately, taking care of health and safety things, wearing personal protective equipment, people employed and all that sort of stuff, and then restoration of the lands afterward. So that's tightly controlled in our case, in Queensland's case, by the Queensland government. So they very tightly control the release of land and mining approvals to people that have to show that they can meet those expectations of doing it in a proper manner. So, whereas in many other countries, that's not the case. Essentially, in other countries, go and buy a pick and shovel and start digging. I mean, no one really particularly cares about it too much, I must say. That's a fairly broad-brushed approach, and that you have different sorts of along the spectrum of, of how that works. So, ethics is very much tied to the societal development, which is very much tied to economic development, which is very much tied to all of those aspects that I just spoke about.
Exactly.
So in our case, in central Queensland, merely because we're a Western country, the bar is up here. We actually start from up here, not down here. So we start up here. So then, therefore, we know that certain rules, regulations have to be adopted before we even put a pick in the ground or a shovel or a machine on the ground, and that we have certain expectations to fulfill. So when we combine that with the notion of traceability and understanding provenance, is where we come in as a supplier, being able to say to our clients, we know where that gemstone came from because we bought that gem from Mick Smith, who was the miner who mined in that particular location. So, and also that we're a partner in a couple of mines as well. So we know that because that's what we do.
Perfect segue for literally the next question that's on here. I'm gonna grab the gemstones because I'm hoping they're in here. I'm the lucky one that gets all the piles of gemstones, right?
Very good.
So I've got the 2 gemstones that you have donated, and I'm like, I should have that up and say what they are. I will do that. But maybe you can tell us more about where these as individual stones came from. So let's see what we're gonna start. I've got, let me get this. So this one is the bicolor stuff. Okay, so this is that one's me. Okay, it's a 0.83 carat, I think a 6 millimeter faceted flat bicolor sapphire from central Queensland, Australia. And probably this is going to look absolutely terrible. Let me get some white. You can't even see the bicolor in the way that I'm holding it. So let's see.
It always is a bit difficult.
Try this recycle paper. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's got.
Well, you can see it just a little bit, but I'm going to put the link in the chat where you can see probably a better photo. So anyway, you know that stone because you sent it to me.
Absolutely. So talking a little bit about the specifics of the gems, and specifically in this case, the sapphire. So central Queensland sapphire tends to be of a particular colour regime, if you want, for a better word. Well, certainly the bulk, if you like, of the gemstone that we mine is of a particular colour regime. And that colour regime spreads from blues, all the blues, right from the dark blue right through to the lighter blues, through to the greens, through to the yellows, and then every shade in between of all of those colours. Now, on occasion, we get other colours, but they are not in commercial quantities. So we'll get a pink occasionally, we'll get an orange, we'll get a purple, and of course that sapphire, corundum, gemological term, can come in practically any colour. Pure corundum, of course, is clear. And as many people, most people in this program would know, it's actually the trace elements that cause colour in corundum or as what we name it as is sapphire. And we specifically call red corundum or red sapphire ruby. Ruby is coloured by a small trace element of chromium. That's a little bit of a lesson in terms of gemology this afternoon. So
great.
My point is that in our particular range, there's certain trace elements that have coloured the gemstones, and particularly, which is unique to only a couple of places around the world, is this whole concept of multiple colour, and not just bicolour, but multiple colour. Now, the terminology used for that is parti colour, P-A-R-T-I, which is short for partition. So a partition meaning a break from one place to the other, for those that don't know that. So parti colour, it's not party, let's have a fun time. It's party, let's recognise the separation of colour.
Yeah.
Sometimes that separation of colour is distinct. That flat that you have got, in many of the flats, it is a very distinct colour separation.
Yeah, I haven't seen that before. I mean, I'm not a super gem. I'm not a gemologist, or like whatever. I'm learning. So this was the first time I saw a stone like this, and it was really striking and looked really unique, and also like the clarity of it.
Correct.
I think was really interesting. Like that's what I noticed.
So that's what we call a faceted flat. So if you, again, I have to go back to the gemological basis of all of this. So corundum is actually formed as a hexagonal crystal. So it grows hexagonally over millions of years, and then it grows as a crystal. Sometimes we find crystals as well. In fact, I've got some crystals. So you'll when it grows as crystals 6, 7, 8 kilometers under the ground, this is where it all happens. And volcanic eruption brings the material up to the top, and over millions of years that material settles in ancient creek beds, and that's what we mine. We're looking for these ancient creek beds because corundum's heavy. It settles down at the bottom of these ancient creek beds. So we call that the wash. So we're always chasing the wash in the mining activity. Anyway, back to the corundum. So what happens when the corundum comes out of the ground, when the sapphire comes out of the ground, over millions of years again, these crystals are broken merely by the action of nature. Water, rocks hitting against each other. So that's why the rough sapphire that you see mostly is all jagged edged, and in some cases it's smooth where it's been water worn, but in most cases it's got a jagged edge. And in some cases, the flat sort of shears off. A flat piece of that cross section of crystal shears off. Hence, you get a lot of this flat material. So we then have developed a particular cut that's a thin cut, but a wider cut, and created what we call these faceted flats.
Yeah, it's a beautiful stone, really beautiful. And then we have the one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the feature. I mean, there's two features when you're talking about gemstones, really, and particularly sapphire. One's the sparkle of the stone, and the second is actually the remarkability of the color in the stone, right? So this flat lends towards the second feature rather than the first, because when you look at the flat, there is no sparkle in it because it's a flat gem.
Right.
But we have designers that have set those beautifully in.
Oh yeah, that's why I said it's gorgeous. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Whoever wins this, I'm going to be sad to see it go. So this other one is a 5 millimeter round, brilliant cut green sapphire from central Queensland, Australia. And so I also is not going to show, but it is okay. I'm not even going to try. I'll hold it up like this. This is faceted and sparkly, and we'll hit the light.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
This is not showing it in any way. Again, I took good videos outside that I think pick up the light a lot better.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. I'm always challenged with that. Don't worry.
So tell us more about this stone.
Okay. Well, that stone again comes from central Queensland, the central Queensland, the mines. It's difficult for me to actually place that specific stone as a particular mining location, but it will be from the immediate area in the central Queensland sapphire fields. So this particular gem is part of our calibrated sapphire collection. So what we do is we calibrate, cut a range of different sizes and shapes. Primarily, we calibrate, cut round brilliants, and that's what that one is, because they're the most popular. We start those at 2 millimeter. Now, on occasion, we do get some smaller. In fact, I've just got some small blues at the moment, like 1.1 millimeter. I mean, how do you cut a 1.1 millimeter gemstone? I don't know, but some people do. It's amazing. Anyway, it's just remarkable to see. It's remarkable to see. So normally speaking, we cut from 2 millimeter up to 5.75. Once they reach 5.75 or over 5.75, we sell them as singular gemstones. Underneath 5.75, we sell them by the carat, right? So we sell them at a particular price per carat. So 5 millimeter is one of the most popular sizes. It's a nice size, small stone. You know, it's an economical version, I suppose, of a small sapphire, and you can still put a 5 millimeter in a ring, and it still works. I mean, obviously, bigger stones are better, but you know, it's all about what your budget is. So, starting at 2 millimeter, rising up to 5.75 in increments of 0.25. So therefore, we have.
I thought I was going to sneeze. Wait. Continue.
No worries. 2 millimeter, 2.25, 2.5, 2.75, 3, 3.2, up to 5.75 across 3 color sequences. Now, what we've done is we've made somewhat of an arbitrary decision to say, okay, well, this lot is blue-green, this lot is blue-yellow, and this lot is green-yellow. So we then bunch them into those categorizations just for ease of managing the gem.
Do you find that there are ones that it's very hard to figure out which of those?
Absolutely.
Do?
All the time.
Yeah.
Does it fit into blue-green or blue-yellow? Has it got a bit of blue in it? Yeah, okay, well, it probably goes into blue-green. That's a question in my mind daily as to where these gems belong. And of course, as you get into a 2 millimeter stone, how do you know? You can hardly see the stone. So it's a tough thing to make those decisions on the smaller stone. But anyway, so we then market and sell those accordingly per size and per color variation. And what I do with designer makers, mostly when they're buying them online or buying them from me remotely, is I will line up a group of, say, 5 millimeter blue-greens on a tray and send them a video and an image, and they will select 3 or 4. So it may iterate back and forth a couple of times just so that the decision can be made about the particular gem. And it works pretty well, actually. Very rarely I actually have someone ring and complain and say, that's not like the stone that I saw. I mean, that's not, you know, it's a very rare time that happens. If it does happen, well, send it back. I'll give you money back. No problem. I mean, you know, there's no argument about that. That's all good. If you want your money back, that's fine. Or if you want to replace a stone, that's fine. I mean, whatever you want. I mean, just quickly on that. I mean, my job here is to help you as a designer do your job. That's all my job is. My job here is to supply all designers with the gemstones they want to meet the needs of their clients. If it's any more, tell me, but that's what my job is as far as I'm concerned. So it's very important for me to make sure that my clients' needs are met with regard to the particular gemstones that they want on behalf of their clients.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, and that makes you a good compassionate business person. Like, well, you understand that it's about that relationship, and
absolutely. It's totally a relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, we set out this business being that. So traditionally, this business is very silo oriented. You know, okay, well, you buy a gem, go home. You don't even, you know, there's no business with the gemstone vendor at all in your business. Well, that's not true, because there's always a crossover. There's always a part of it, because given that I will only ever sell wholesale, every designer knows that they can trust and rely on me not to go directly to the public and backdoor them into one of their clients. All right. So that's really important. So that's why I say to the designers that I do business with, if you want to share your piece on Instagram and tag me, feel free, because you can rest assured that I won't. If anyone tries to buy a gemstone off me that isn't verified designer maker, it just doesn't happen. I mean, my website, I get applications for access to the site daily from everybody. I manually verify every application to the site. I have to. I mean, and, you know, obviously I've got some things templated, and you'll get a templated message back saying, okay, well, if you're a designer maker, send me your Instagram and website. Simple.
Yeah.
And of course, most of the time I don't hear from them.
But I mean, that's the whole ecosystem of this ethical sourcing, right? So you are building these relationships, and the people that you're working with are people that care about that. They're passing that on to their client, right? So they're building a business that they're showing that these are values that are important to them. And so it's that whole, then that's getting to the customer, right? And so you're then, like, your message of that is eventually getting to the customer in that way, because you're developing those relationships.
Well, absolutely. And it's in my interest to cultivate that relationship and to make sure that everything is okay. And that's why there is never any question about the gem. I mean, the gem is incidental at the end of the day, because if the gem isn't satisfactory to the designer and or the client or both, well, I'm not going to turn around and say, well, sorry, bad luck, you bought it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, let's face it. So that's why it has to be a very clear understanding. And that's why I spend time iterating back and forth with the designers about the specific gems or pieces that they might have selected off my website to have a closer look at.
Yeah, but that's why people appreciate, I mean, that's why they're working with you, and they appreciate that kind of attention and like personability. And
well, I hope so, and I think so, and I think we're right. So we see ourselves as a partner with the designer maker in building their business. It's clearly the case, and then however we can help them, you, whomever, build their design business, that's success as far as I'm concerned, because if you're successful as a designer maker, we're successful. It just stands to reason. It's inevitable. Now, and some of the time we can't supply the particular gem, and that's just a function of more so of timing in many cases, because, you know, stock is coming and going all the time. Now, sometimes I don't have a particular gemstone that someone wants, a particular color, size, or shape, and that's unfortunate. But there again, in 3 months' time or 2 weeks' time, I could have it. I just don't know. And it's not like ordering a cup of coffee. You know, you don't get a gemstone and say, okay, well, you know, I want this. It's not that at all. It's the availability of the gem.
Yeah.
Because not all the time that they're available.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not doing a CAD file and having it 3D printed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we try our best. I mean, we try our best, and the good designers have the flexibility and can work with the client to say, that's a bit tough getting that one. How about this as an alternative? Or how about this? Or how about that? Or how about we wait for a few months and just see what stock comes along? Or, you know, there's another way of dealing with it. And that's what we're trying to say. We're trying to say, okay, well, maybe it's not available now, but it doesn't mean that it's never going to be available. It's just at this point, at just this moment of time.
Yeah. If any of the folks joining us have questions, you can ask them at any time, please. I will find them and ask them. So if you can provide us with all of your knowledge, some kind of like basic understanding, if somebody is trying to be more intentional about gem sourcing, what should they look for? So what does ethical sourcing really mean? Which I think we've talked about, but maybe you have more to add with that. But like green flags for sourcing gems, red flags for sourcing gems, because I think there's a lot of also different levels of even what is considered ethically sourced, right? There's a range, because you're always going to have a grade range and a price range and things like that. So how can help folks that are trying to
good question, actually, real good question. And we're seeing movement in this area from designer makers and or the jewelry industry, broadly speaking, in terms of being more, how can I say, more having more expectations of information from vendors, and in some ways, putting more demands on vendors to answer the questions and to be able to verify what they're saying. So for us at Capricorn Gems, merely because of the supply chain length or shortness, mine, Cap Gems market, we don't face the complexities of many other gemstone vendors, and we don't face the challenges of getting that provenance and traceability through the system. So in many cases, when you're buying a gemstone from a vendor at Tucson or wherever you are, you don't know how many hands that gem's been through, right? But in our case, you do, right? You do. But in many cases, some of those gemstones might have been through a dozen hands. The person that mined it, the person that employed the person that mined it, the person that sold it on to a wholesaler at that particular location, the person that came along and bought it from that wholesaler and perhaps exported it to the US, Australia, or wherever, then another wholesaler who put that into another wholesale situation, and then maybe a vendor. So that's possibly 5 or 6 at a minimum.
So for the most part, like, can you even, is that chain, is it too hard to trace to know that, like, you're not really going to find that those stones would be ethically sourced if they're going through?
Good question again. My answer to that is that that's why organisations like Responsible Jewellery Council and International Coloured Gemstone Association have struggled and will continue to struggle with determining a provenance framework for coloured gemstones, particularly coloured gemstones. Compared to diamonds, diamonds have got their own challenges. Let's face it. But coloured gemstones are even much more difficult because of the variety of sourcing, the locations, the people involved. It's practically a nightmare. I personally, Ian Bone, don't believe they'll ever be in a situation of determining an appropriate provenance framework. Now, Everledger has tried it through their provenance proof system, and it's the technology. Okay, well, it's okay to a point, but it relies on information input. It's all very well to say, okay, well, we've got a traceability system here whereby, the blockchain system traces this gem right through, and then therefore you can be sure that well, that's okay. But as a fella over in East Africa got a smartphone, and is he keying in, is he taking a photo of that gemstone when he mines it? Probably not. And is the dealer. So, the practicalities and the realities of it make it just so difficult to do and even to expect to be done. So I don't believe I'll ever have a solid framework system that actually people can put hand on heart and say, yes, this is what works, and this is how gemstones are traced. So you're getting back to the dilemma again for the designer and for the client, because that's where it counts.
Yeah,
that's where it counts. So what can a designer do if they want to undertake a if they want to try to get further clarity on the provenance and traceability and associated ethics regarding the production of that stone? In my opinion, it's about questions, and it's about the decision to buy the stone or not, right? Now, mostly when people go and you're looking at gem shows, when next week we're in Brooklyn, and we'll have a stone set up on the table, and the first thing people do is look at the beauty of the gems, and that's okay, and that's natural. What's the sparkle in the stone? What's the color? How big is it? What's the price? There are 4 or 5 aspects there of the decision making of that particular gem that person is looking for. And I see the minds. I see in the minds of the designer, what can I make out of this? This is going to look fabulous in that particular ring design that I get it. I understand it. I know what's going on, and that's how it should be. However, there's an associated part of that situation of questions that needs to be asked, and the designers need to get into the habit of asking those questions of vendors. Tell me about where this gem originates from, okay, and what's acceptable as an answer. So so tell me where this gem's from. It's from Africa. Well, is that an answer? Probably not sufficient. Certainly not from my book. It's from East Africa. It's a little bit better. Well, it's from, Kenya. It's from wherever. It's from Tanzania. It's from a country. Probably a bit better. What's the location? Okay. What's the region? What's the mining area? Now, if that vendor can't answer that question, the designer's clearly got to be asking themselves about whether or not they should be buying that stone. Because a client will come along, and particularly the younger generation clients in your age, that sort of age group, are coming along with that expectation. Where's the stone from? Who mined the gem? What's the answers here? What's the vendor saying? Right. So it's really important that particular aspect of the questions are asked, and then pursuing that line of questioning. And if you're feeling you're getting fobbed off, or you're just not getting the information that you want to satisfy yourself, but not just yourself, but your client, because it's part of your story too. It's part of your story as a designer to be able to say, well, look, I understand where this is from. I'm confident about this vendor having the full detail, and he has shown me through imagery and through stories and through whatever that she knows what's going on and where that particular gemstone originates from, and who mined it, and the circumstances in which it was mined. So those questions really are important to ask over and above all of those other aspects of colour, price, size, etc., etc. And until and unless those questions are asked and designers then make decisions about whom they shop off, whom they buy from, based partially on those aspects, until that's the case, the industry is not going to respond. So the industry will keep going on its merry way, and you'll have vendors there that don't particularly care where the gemstone comes from and really couldn't care less. It doesn't matter. It's all about the gem. But I believe it is changing, and I've seen the change, and I'm witnessing that change as every month and year goes by. And we're starting now to get into a realization where those questions are asked.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard too, like especially if you're young and emerging, right? And like you might be educated and know that sourcing is important, and but you just like maybe your business isn't you're not able to sell work at that price point that can justify, investing in those stones. And I'm sure a lot of people early in their careers are, or anybody, like, right, like these are the challenges that I think people face, that it's not that intentionality and awareness isn't there, but then it's like, how do I make a smart business decision about this? And I think that it can be done, right, but then you have to devote a lot of attention into figuring out how to make that actually work.
Yeah, that is true. There is no denying, and it's not easy. But that's the reason why we established the ethical gem suppliers. That's the reason why we moved down the pathway of creating a group with similar interest in terms of the supply of gemstones that have traceability into the market. That's the reason why we get together and have a couple of shows. And that's the reason why people come along, because they know as soon as they walk in that door that everyone around all those tables knows exactly the story of where those gems come from.
Yeah.
And as
Well,
soon as
talk a little bit more about that, right? Because you're talking about collaborative, right? I mean, we all do this. We're all these little niches that are trying to do this work and hope that then it picks up, right? And it will grow. So talk a little bit, because there's a gem fair next week in New York at Brooklyn Metalworks. Anybody that is nearby, I will be there on, what day did I say? Thursday. I'm excited, but talk a little bit more about how that collaborative work that you do.
No. Well, let's talk about how it started. I mean, the US scene for the Ethical Gem Fair started 4 years ago now, but the actual Ethical Gem Fair originated out of the UK with myself and a guy called Stuart Poole. We created the concept of an Ethical Gem Fair back in 2017. And it was interesting. When I look back at it, it was really interesting how this all started, because I can remember Stuart and I went to a conference in Edinburgh, I think it was, in Scotland. And, it was a designers conference, and, we go along, have a bit of a listen. And one of the biggest challenges is designers trying to find out where to get gemstones that are ethically sourced. And that was questions raised left, right, and centre in the room. And I'm looking at Stuart, and he's looking at me, and I'm saying, "Do you know where you're starting?" "Yeah, I know where mine come from." Well, so we then sort of just started to build on this idea, and we then knew that a couple of other people that had this whole concept forefront on their mind about traceability and provenance of their goods. So we then started with the first Ethical Gem Fair in London in 2017. And subsequent to that, we've had that annually, although with COVID and a few other complications, I haven't been back to the UK, but I'm going back next year, and we'll restart the Ethical Gem Fair in London. So, the concept started there, and it was immediately a success, because immediately we had a whole heap of designers come along and say, "Wow, this is pretty cool. We know where we can get our gemstones that have a full traceability and that have a full provenance, and that we know that we can trust you guys, because, hey, I can see you in that video there back at the mine talking to these miners." So, there's no creation of any sort of situation of falseness here. We go back to them. We go to these locations. Stuart goes to Sri Lanka, down to Africa. I mean, he's always doing that sort of stuff, sourcing his material, and I'm doing the same in Australia. So that's part of our story. Go to our YouTube channel and you can see what we do. I mean, we post videos all the time about the mining, the processing. It's all open book. I mean, we've got nothing to hide in terms of that situation. So people can rest assured, and they know, and they can see, and then therefore they trust. So it began in the UK, then we brought it into the US. So it was always a challenge. And I mean, I can remember walking around Tucson in 2018, I think. I went, "Yeah, we need to get a show here in Tucson." Came across the Masonic Temple, in Scott Street. And we started the first year at Tucson 3 years ago. And then subsequent, we've had, now the show is established in Tucson at that venue, and it's a fantastic venue. And it's a show, and I just touched on this a moment ago, or earlier in my conversation. It's a show that designers can come to, and we've had this feedback from designers. They can come to and they can feel pretty relaxed. You know, there's no hustle and bustle. There's no pressure. Come and have a seat, sit down over there, have a bit of a chat, have a talk to us. If you buy something, that's all good. If you don't, well, okay, that's okay. But you're not lining 3 deep, standing up at a booth like you do in most other places, trying to get the attention of someone to buy a gem. Doesn't work that way. So I have my table, but I also have a side table where the designer can sit down and play with the gems. Tray comes out. Oh, what do you got? I want some 4mm round brilliant. Oh, here we go. Take your choice. You know, here. Get the loop, get the headpiece, get whatever. Get the torch. Have a look. See what you want, and then someone else will come along and do the same thing. So you know, it's a sequence of comfortableness with the show in terms of it being a nice place to go. It's relaxed. Everyone knows each other. There's no pressures, no big deal about the whole thing. And you know, that's just how we do our business. That's
awesome.
how we do.
That's what we're trying to do at our Tucson event. We'll see. We gotta get it. You said,
and it's important to do that. And it's important to do that, because the days of going to a gem show where you're hustled and bustled and you're rushed and it's no one likes that.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah, and I think being able to, it's that whole, you're going to get a designer who wants to spend time, is really going to be particular about that stone. You know, these are investments. They want to ask questions, and it's all, that environment is conducive to that kind of experience, which is what they're looking for to make those decisions, because they're big decisions when you're buying like on that scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Great. Yeah.
And you've got to have a place for people to sit down. I mean, you just can't do that across the counter. I don't think you can't do it well. Yeah. You know, you got to have a place where people can sit down. And for some designers, it's not just a designer. They've got a team of 2 or 3 people.
Right.
You know, there's a number, I won't talk names, but there's a number of people that bring 3 or 4 people, and they want to have a conversation about the pieces they're buying.
Right.
So we've got to make sure that we have an appropriate.
I want to go to this gem fair just to see all these different kinds of, right, because it's interesting, you know, when a lot of we're individual makers, we're working in our studios, we're studio artists, but then you scale up, right? You've got these jewelry stores and different larger businesses, and I'm very curious to like learn more about all that goes into that.
But Brooklyn's is slightly different because it's not as big as our venue in Tucson. I'll come to Tucson, of course. I mean, you'll see how we operate there. But there's nothing wrong with Brooklyn. I mean, obviously we'll be there. Not everyone's coming. I mean, there's 6 of us going, 6 out of the 8. 1 lady's ill and can't make it. But I mean, the other thing we do, and what we'll be doing at Tucson, at Brooklyn, we'll do a little bit of an educational talk. You know, it's not a big deal. We don't make a big deal about it, but we'll get up there and have a bit of a conversation with whoever wants to listen about what we're doing and about how. And last year it was good. We had a good turnout. People were both at the tables, you know, looking at gems, but then, you know, they sat down and had a bit of a listen to what each of us had to say. So, you know, this year we'll be sort of building on that and talking a little bit about, okay, well, what's happened in the last 12 months in each of our businesses, and if there's anything new, and or, you know, just fielding questions, just a little bit like this. I mean, a little bit like this conversation, so that people can learn. You know, someone asks a question and then I talk about it and then sort of drift off somewhere else, and then, you know, generally there's information involved and people are picking up.
You'll have to come to our Tucson event and give a talk.
Absolutely.
They're the week after yours.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I mean, a lot of the time we tend to be a little bit superficial about what we talk about merely because of the time. But if you want detail, we can talk detail. I mean, I can do a 1-hour presentation on the cutting of sapphire if you really want to go down that path. It's not a big deal. But so what I'm saying is that we can unpack all aspects of our business to tell people and to enable them to understand a little bit more about why we do what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, no, that's great. What I don't know if anyone has questions. We have just a couple minutes left. So so where can people find more of your work?
Easiest place, the website, www.capricorngems.com.au, and Instagram, where I post not that often, but I post maybe once or twice a week, some gems, or basically something new that's come in, or advice of shows or whatever it might be. But look, the information at the back tab, or the far right tab actually, of the website, I think it's called Literature and Information, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a couple of PDF files you can look at. There's a trifold brochure. There's bits and pieces of information about who we are, what we do, and the like. So yes, that's really a snapshot of the business. And what I've said in this presentation in terms of the detail, in terms of the relationship aspect of our business, is what it is in terms of how we see ourselves positioned with designer makers.
Great. And it says, what are you most excited about that's coming soon? But I'm thinking maybe this gem, is there something sooner than this gem fair that's next week?
No, this is
big, really big that you're excited about?
Tucson's always a big thing. It's a big deal for us because many people come there, and they all, we have a bit of a social activity as well on Monday night, and we'll do that again next year. We've got a lot of friends in this business. I mean, our clients are our friends. Some are closer than others, for no other reason that probably we spend a bit more time with some than others. But anyone who wants to befriend us, well, you're more than welcome to come along and have a conversation. We're pretty affable sort of characters, and we can explain things. And if you've got a burning question, don't hesitate to sort of bring it up, and say, well, and challenge us. I mean, I'm up for a challenge. I'm not going to shy away from anything that people are, okay, well, prove that you are. Okay, well, I will. No problem at all. Nothing to hide. As I say, totally transparent. So, we're very much open to that situation, rather than, wanting to hide under a rock somewhere about what our business is and what we do. No, that's not the case. So we're very open. The website is updated daily. I mean, it is live, and I would argue that there's hardly any gems on there that shouldn't be on there, because I'm very particular with it. And maybe I make a mistake and there's a couple that shouldn't be up there, but I think we've got about 1,000 gems on that site at the moment. There's a lot of gems there. And, if people can't find what they're looking for, well, just give us a call, send us a WhatsApp, or send me an email. Because again, we started cutting some shapes because of demand. People saying, oh, I need some kites, cut more kites. Well, okay. And we found a guy who was an expert kite cutter, and he cut some and the smallest kites you could ever see. But he cut some lovely kite shaped cuts. So, we work to the demand, and it takes a bit of time because our cutting processes, we cut in Thailand, merely for economic reasons. But we've worked with our Thai cutters, our Thai partners for, Rod's worked with these people for many years. So he knows these people going way back. So, we will respond to what the market is saying, and what people are requiring.
Awesome. Well, it was wonderful to meet you virtually, and I will meet you in person next week, and
look forward to it.
Learn more about Capricorn Gems and about ethical sourcing and everything. So thank you so much. And Thank you for contributing to our raffle. We have 4 different package parcels of, they're all valued at about $900 to like $1,100 each, I think.
Excellent. Yes, you've got some beautiful pieces there from a number of suppliers, and yeah, I'd encourage your members to dig into the pocket, because there's some real value there for sure. I guarantee that. And
There
the
is some
quality.
really good stuff there, and the proceeds, well, all the proceeds, because they were all the gemstones were generously donated, and so we are raising money for SNAG. So thank you.
Absolutely. And organisations like SNAG, it's important to have a revenue stream, and to do this sort of thing is really important. And you'll always get support from us to do that.
We do. You have been very supportive, and we really appreciate that. So with all that, we will depart, and thank you again. And the raffle is open till the 6th of November. And yeah, I will see you next week.
Just on the raffle, I mean, if you want to help, I mean, maybe we can do something at Brooklyn to mention. I don't know. I mean, maybe we can talk about that.
Oh yeah, yes, that would be great.
I mean, do you have physical tickets?
No, but it's a website.
Okay.
And like a QR code or something. I can.
Okay, well, maybe bring.
You know what? I can bring you. I'll make a little flyer.
Do that. Yeah, for
that.
sure. Do that, or bring some postcards or something that people can take along, and that we can put on our table. And say,
I don't know if I can turn postcards around that quickly.
Well, something with the QR code that they can actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see what I can get together.
Whatever suits you, just put it together.
Well, thank you for that. I'm gonna see what I can put together and have it ready for you. That's great. Awesome. Okay. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm gonna stop recording.